Welcome back, chess fans. In today's video, we'll look at a game played by Bobby Fischer where he once again proved why he's one of the greatest attacking players in chess history, defeating a four-time Mongolian champion. So grab your popcorn and let's go. So the year is 1967 and we're in Tunisia, and in this game Bobby Fischer was playing against Lhamsuren Myagmarsuren, who is a four-time Mongolian champion, so a very strong player, and Bobby Fischer opens up with e4 as he usually does. His opponent plays pawn to e6, pawn to d3, so once again we see sort of a closed system by Fischer, and here pawn to d5 is played, and then knight to d2 by Fischer, knight to f6 by black, and pawn to g3. So here we see Bobby Fischer playing a King's Indian attack. Here pawn to c5 is played, bishop to g2, knight to c6, knight to f3, bishop to e7, and castles. So everything up until this point is very normal stuff. Both sides are just developing, bringing their pieces into play, and also castling their kings. And here Fischer plays pawn to e5. Now pawn to e5 is a very committal move, because it removes the tension in the center, but it takes space on the king side. So after a move like knight to d7 here, Bobby Fischer has one plan, and that is to create an attack on this side of the board, because his pieces are aiming this way. His pawn is taking squares from his opponent's pieces, and they're not able to defend this side of the board very well. Before he does all of that, though, this pawn is under attack, so he has to defend that. So he plays rook to e1, pawn to b5, and then knight to f1. Knight to f1 might seem weird to a lot of you guys, but it's actually a very normal move, and I'll explain what the idea is. I actually do not play King's Indian attack, so I don't know all the nuances in this position, but I do play a very similar structure, which is the Catalan with the kingside fianchetto, and sometimes in the closed Catalan we get a quite similar structure where this ends up on e5, and the plan there is to go h4, knight to h2, and then knight to g4. From here, the knight also can go to e3 to g4. That's also another possibility. But the main thing is this knight on g4 is quite useful. The bishop on c8 is never an issue. And this knight on g4 usually is a very strong attacking piece, especially when black plays h6. And when black plays h6, then there are lots of sacrifices, such as knight takes h6. So that's one of the plans. Knight f1, this is a very normal move. Knight h4, knight h2, knight g4 is coming, or knight e3, knight g4, whichever one Bobby chooses to employ. So here pawn to b5, or pawn to b4 played by black, h4 played by Fischer, a5, and then bishop to f4, reinforcing the control of the defense of this pawn, pawn to a4, and then pawn to a3 by Bobby. He stops a3 by black. Even though this is also possible, you could simply continue with knight to h2, but allowing a3 is a bit sketchy, because after a3, b3, most likely what black is going to do here is black is going to play f6, open up the center, and it's going to be very difficult for Bobby to get anything on the king side. If black plays f6 successfully, then black will simply be fine. Maybe not f6 right away, but maybe like bishop b7 first. But at some point f6 is coming. Let's actually see if it's okay. It's not entirely the most accurate move right now, but it is even here it is sort of fine. So Bobby did not want to allow this much control over the dark squares, so he chooses instead to play a3 and stop this pawn in its track. And here captures on a3, b captures on a3, and knight to a5 is played by black. Bobby continues with knight to e3, bishop to a6, and then Bobby plays bishop to h3. It was actually slightly better to go knight g5 right away. And the main idea here, the main attacking idea that gives white a huge advantage is this position. In this position is this idea knight g5 followed by queen to h5, because what this does is it basically attacks the pawn on h7. It forces black to push the pawn to h6, after which you can drop the knight back, and then, as I said earlier, this knight g4, knight takes h6 sacrifice is always looming. So basically we want to bait out h6 and then try to obliterate the black king. So Bobby tries to do that a slightly different way. He chooses to start with bishop to h3. This is sort of more like a preventative move rather than an attacking move, because it prevents the f-pawn push from black, because then the bishop on h3 would be attacking this pawn on e6. Of course, that's why black cannot push this pawn right now. So pawn to d4 is played by black, knight back to f1, and then knight to b6 played by black. Here Bobby plays knight to g5, a knight to d5, and then bishop drops back to d2. He didn't even have to. The best move is actually to go queen h5 right away, even though it allows this. Well, actually, first of all, this is under attack, so maybe a move like h6 would be played, but the position is so crazy that there's even ideas like knight takes f7, and then after rook takes f7, there's like bishop takes e6, there's bishop takes h6, there's like so many things here. Well, bishop takes e6 is much easier though, of course. You're just winning the rook, or you're winning the knight, because if the queen defends the rook, then, you know, the knight is completely lost. So this is an absolutely phenomenal attack that could also happen from this position. Bobby chooses to save his dark square bishop because he recognizes that this bishop could be very valuable when it comes to attacking this black king. And the thing is, he actually probably made the correct choice, because he used this bishop quite well in a couple of moves you're gonna see. So after bishop takes g5, Bobby takes back, and then queen to d7 is played, queen to h5 by Bobby, and then rook to c8 played by black. Black is trying to push c4 here, and that's the only way he's trying to get any play. If he's able to push c4, then he can capture on d3, and he has a target on d3. The problem with this plan is that it is a bit too slow, because Bobby's pieces are arriving, and this is not good news for the black pieces. So knight d2 chosen by Bobby Fischer. Computer gives this a miss, but Bobby had a very clear idea, which you're going to see very soon. And the idea here was that Bobby wanted to play a brilliant, breathtaking move, bishop to f6, which attacks this pawn and threatens queen g5. So for example, if black doesn't do anything, first and foremost, this immediately loses the game to queen g5, g6, queen h6. The king gets checkmated. There's nothing you can do. You can delay it for like one move with knight e2 spike check, but other than that, the game's over. Next move, you're getting mated. So that doesn't work. What if you just take the bishop? Well, if you take the bishop, Bobby's simply going to recapture, and all the threats are still looming in the position. Let's say you play king to h8, right? Because you want to meet a move like a queen g5, queen g7 with a move like rook to g8. The problem is Bobby will now play knight to f3. And how are you defending knight g5? The only way to defend knight g5 and queen h7 checkmate is to go rook to g8. This is the only move, because then you want to sacrifice, right? Other than that, you know, you're not going to be able to defend this. But instead of going g5 now Bobby will go to e5 and attack the queen and the f7 pawn at the same time. So if the queen moves, you just simply take f7. King has no squares, so queen has to be sacrificed. And at the end of this whole sequence, Bobby is up a queen, and he has a completely winning position. He has a queen for 2 knights, to be very specific, and he also got some pawns, because he's going to win this pawn as well, and he's going to have a bunch of pawns, so many pawns. So Bobby is doing quite well here. Going back, that's why this bishop was not taken, and instead of that, queen to e8 was played. And if here Bobby went for queen g5, there's a simple defensive move after a move like either, I don't think g6 works, maybe just queen f8 right away. Actually, I was gonna say g6, but this might not be correct because it weakens the dark squares. No, queen f8 right away simply defends the pawn without creating additional dark square weaknesses. So this is a very nice try by black. And here after queen e8, Bobby played another brilliant move which is knight to e4, still sacrificing the bishop. The bishop still cannot be taken because now the knight arrives with devastating effects, forking everybody in black household. And if the knight is taken, now rook takes e4 leads to a huge attack. So for example, after rook takes e4, if a move like g6 is played, there's rook to g4, and this leads to a huge attack because queen h6 is coming. And let's say you play a move, right? Let's say you play a random move like rook to b8. This pretty much loses immediately to queen h6, and this once again breathtaking sacrifice, rook takes g6. After h takes g6, there's queen h8, so this is a very simple checkmate. So f takes has to be played, and then after bishop takes e6, this is simply checkmate. You don't even have to take the queen, you just made in one here. I guess maybe you could argue that there's rook to a7 here, which is a sort of a defensive resource that black can employ, but even here I don't think this stops anything. I think white can just go queen g5 and continue hammering at the black position with the h pawn. So this move, it defends the position temporarily, but it doesn't defend the position permanently. So black is still gonna get checkmated within a couple of moves. So absolutely fantastic move played by Bobby here. So once again, this knight wasn't taken. I just showed you a line of what could have happened if it was taken, but it wasn't taken in the actual game. Instead of that, pawn to g6 was played by black, and Bobby just moved the queen out of the way. Queen g5, knight takes e4, rook takes e4, and pawn to c4. Black is trying to create some counterplay here. The problem is white is just way too fast. Now this is hanging and the rook is coming to h4, so this is just extremely dangerous. And here c takes d3 was played. Bobby didn't even take back, he just went rook to h4, and after a move like rook to a7, here Fischer played the most devious, disgusting move that I have ever seen, because it's such a sinister move, because it's not really a brilliant move by the game review, but you might as well give this a brilliant move. He played bishop to g2, and bishop to g2 sets up an amazing tactic. To explain what bishop to e2 does, let's say this pawn is taken, which is actually what happened in the game. Fischer plays queen to h6, and the only way to defend against queen g7 checkmate is to go queen f8 and try to exchange the queens. The problem is here Fischer proves why he's one of the best attackers ever, and he sacrifices the queen. Queen takes h7. Here is when black resigned, but I will show you what could have happened. After king takes h7, here Fischer would have played h takes g6. Here, if you go back, of course, you get checkmated, so you take the pawn, let's say, and this bishop on g2 goes to e4 and delivers checkmate to the black king. And this is how Fischer would have won the game if black had not resigned. So this was an absolutely fantastic game played by Fischer. You could argue that maybe there was a better defensive move, and there's actually probably only one defensive move here, which is queen f8 right away. But here Fischer would have probably played bishop to e4 and just continued his attack. So I don't think this stops anything. The Fischer is still completely winning. You have to go like f takes here, and then you go bishop takes g6. And how do you stop this? So after bishop takes g6, what do you do? There's so many brilliant moves in the position, it's crazy. After this, you get mated. If you don't take, you still get mated. So there's nothing to be done here. This is a completely winning position. I hope you guys enjoyed this game, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.